Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Passing the Torch. You'll notice that in today's episode, we experienced some technical difficulties while recording. We apologise for any loss of quality of viewing or listening experience that this may cause. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Well, kia ora everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Passing the Torch. Today I'm very honoured to be joined by Sophie Handford, so thanks so much, Sophie, for taking the time out to join us today.
Kia ora, Connor, thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to start off with the same question that I ask all of my interviewees, which is, could you just give us a brief introduction in your own words of sort of who you are?
Oh, who am I? Yeah, okay. I'm an activist, a politician, a campaigner, a sister, a daughter, a child of Paikākariki, which is a small seaside village on the Kāpiti coast. My day-to-day looks like sitting around the Kāpiti Coast District Council table and speaking on behalf of Papatūānuku, the planet, and future generations, and also chairing our strategy operations and finance committee. So getting to, I guess, have my hands on the tether as to the direction in which our district moves, which is a massive privilege that I don't take lightly. And I'm also studying towards a Bachelor of Communications. So yeah, my days are very varied, but essentially I am just trying to use every opportunity to be able to say and know that I did everything in my power and use my voice to its full potential to reduce emissions and to create a climate just world for generations to come. So that's what my day-to-day entails, and it looks different like every day. So yeah, so that's who I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was your life like growing up?
Oh, my life growing up. So this is such an interesting question. I love it. So yeah, I grew up in Paikākariki. It's a village of roughly 1,700 people. So the most amazing kind of whānau-like vibe where you know everyone, you walk down the street and, you know, from such a young age, everyone's supporting you and cheering you on. So I feel really grateful to have grown up in that kind of environment. My dad started a sustainable land use business just a couple of years before I was born. So as his business was growing, so was I, and that meant being out at the weekends planting trees and kind of supporting his endeavours, which inherently have become my own, and figuring out how I can, kind of chart my own path through taking climate action and protecting the environment and encouraging others to do the same. So from a real young age, I was, out in the bush, out planting trees. My mum also was involved in a bunch of kind of Greenpeace protests and actions. So she didn't actually tell me that though until a couple of years ago, and kind of was able to see the connections to what I've been doing. I helped to coordinate the school strike for climate in 2019 as well. So I guess, growing up has been a weird ride, as I guess it is for all of us. But yeah, growing up in a seaside village and understanding that climate change is and will continue to impact on us, and that if we don't, do things now to both safeguard our community and make it more resilient through different kind of models of infrastructure, but also through long-term planning, then that's something we should be quite concerned about. And from a really young age, I was aware of that because you could see the coast changing, and you could see the sea levels changing, and also you could see the impacts of severe storms, which were happening more and more frequently. I went to Paikākariki school, so 150 students, really small, and then went on to Kāpiti College, where it had a roll of 1,800, ended up becoming student rep on the board of trustees in year 10, did that year 11, then was service captain, and then was head girl, and then one thing led to another, and then somehow I found myself, being involved in climate activism, and then off the back of that, running for council. So it's been I can't really connect the dots, and I think if I had to, I've never really had much of a plan, just a why, and I think that's just meant that my childhood's been, and I still honestly feel like a child, if I'm being completely honest. It's been interesting.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that sort of environmentalist background that you had growing up. What was your first step from that sort of world into more activism and politics?
My first step was probably in primary school when I was in year 8, so I would have been around 12 years old. I was just kind of feeling like, cool, like my friends and I are out here planting trees, my dad's leading the charge, like it's great, there's so much on the ground action, and it feels like there's this kind of real momentum and people are like driven to do the right thing. But then if we look to our leaders, like those in parliament, what are they saying, what are they doing, like where's the leadership? You know, we rely on these people to provide that for us, but actually we can't be complacent in that. Like we have to also keep the pressure on. So I invited our local member of parliament at the time, a Labour MP, in to speak to my class, and my classmates were like, why have you brought this old man and to talk to us or with us or to ask him questions? We don't know what's going on. But I essentially put the question to him, what are you doing to make sure that the world that we live in when we're older is safe, that it has a stable climate, that it's that we've made the most of the opportunities that we have to protect the environment, to enhance the environment. And he just kind of like passed the buck and was like, oh, you know, I'm aware of these different policy platforms and like these are the kind of vague things we're doing, but actually you should ask our climate change minister. And I was kind of like, well, that pains me that you don't feel the responsibility to do anything about this issue, which we're all contributing to just by existing and by perpetuating the system that we're currently kind of trapped within. Like, you know, we've got capitalism, colonialism, we've got kind of the patriarchy, all of these systems that intersect, and the fact that this person in this leadership role doesn't see that he has a responsibility to do anything about those things was really quite worrying, because I was like, oh, they're our leaders. Like I put him on a pedestal, but then I was like, he doesn't actually really know, doesn't really know what it's like on the ground, or what we as young people are worried about or scared for, or the ways that we hope the world could be. So I guess that was when I connected the dots to go, oh my gosh, politics is actually so important, because if the people we rely on for leadership aren't leading, well, yeah, we're kind of screwed. So that's how I connected the dots.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about what led you to start the Aotearoa New Zealand branch of School Strike for Climate.
I was quite simply just feeling like I had no real meaningful kind of outlet to put this fear that I was feeling about the pace of change, and just the fact that we're either staying in the same position or moving backwards when it comes to climate. We're continuing to invest in roads. We're continuing to expand the agricultural industry in New Zealand. We're continuing to just make it like this kind of birth child of New Zealand that we're so proud of. And I was just kind of feeling like, oh, I feel this fear, but if I let it sit, you know, it just makes me feel so helpless, and I just want to have something to channel that into. And when I was having conversations with my friends, they were saying the exact same thing. Like we want to feel like we can do something. We want to feel like we can, we can kind of vote with our feet. Like so many young people can't vote, with the voting age being 18, and it should be 16. But we need to provide those opportunities for as many people as possible to be a part of something bigger than themselves, because individual change is totally important, but yeah, we're far stronger together in my view. So yeah, I just kind of, I guess, stuck my head above the sand and just kind of said, like, I'm tired of feeling so hopeless and paralyzed by fear that I just want to do something. And so I reached out to a few friends from high school, and then just put something on social media that same night, and the amount of people who came back to me and said, count me in, I'll be an organizer in Christchurch, and I'll coordinate in Dunedin. And then we formed this team of young people right across New Zealand, roughly 40 of us, who were organizing in our different communities. And yeah, it grew into something that was far bigger than ever anticipated, from a few of us just feeling like we needed to do something, we needed to activate, we needed to build some momentum, and find a way of channeling that fear that we were feeling, became 170,000 people doing exactly the same, because they also needed that vehicle, but we all kind of didn't know who to look to provide it. And I think it was just good timing that a few of us decided to give it a go. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Those strikes really sort of dominated the national consciousness in 2019. What was the experience like for you to be there and be part of that mass movement?
Oh, it brought so much hope. It seriously did. And not just because you could see how many other people were actually really supportive of bold, transformational climate action, but the fact that we were getting calls from the Prime Minister's private secretary, we were getting calls from the climate minister, we were getting invited to be on national TV to share this message and this call to action for both our politicians, but also the New Zealand public. Like, it just made me realize that people will sit up and listen if you make enough noise. And yes, we had to encourage kids to not go to school. Yes, some people took issue to that, but actually that was part of what made the strikes different, and then what I guess galvanized the media and the public's attention. So it felt, yeah, it felt amazing just to know that there are so many people in New Zealand who actually back this cause, and that if that's not a reason for our leaders to go further and faster, to feel like they have the mandate, then I don't know what is, and we've just got to keep providing it.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
to be national coordinator, I mean, you were dealing with the media, with logistics, with getting the word out. What was that a difficult experience?
Yeah, it was challenging at times for sure, and it took a lot of hours. Like there were days when I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and I'd be drafting press releases because I knew that we wanted one to go out at 7 that morning, and so it was just go go go. And yeah, I definitely had moments of kind of real burnout and just like complete overwhelm and tiredness. But at the same time, there were so many other young people who were contributing and who kind of kept the spirits bolstered. But yeah, it was a lot to manage, and the media interactions were probably one of the more challenging aspects of it. Just some of the things that the people who were interviewing you would say or assume, or because I was 18 at the time, it was like, oh, you're just naive, you don't really understand climate science, or like you don't really understand the kind of legislative framework that New Zealand operates within, and we're so constrained, and or you're just a puppet for the Green Party, or all this kind of stuff, like just complete nonsense. Um, but it was kind of, and also people saying, "Oh, you're just so delusional. Like you really think this is going to make a difference? Like all this kind of stuff. You're a waste of space. This whole movement is an absolute joke. Blah blah blah." And there are moments where you almost start to believe it because you're just hearing it from a whole bunch of people who are kind of on the outside of your little echo chamber. So there were moments where I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is not going to make a difference. It's not worth it. Or like for all the time and energy and effort and the sense of hope that we've brought to young people, like what if it really just doesn't do anything? But it did. And it still is. Like the fact that we're able to say that 3.5% of New Zealand's population showed up for transformational emissions reductions now, like that's big. But yeah, it was hard.
Yeah,
Not to, yeah, I don't want to sugarcoat it.
yeah. You were also Chris Farfoy's youth MP in the 2019 Youth Parliament. Could you tell me a bit about that experience?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was an experience where I felt like a massive imposter, eh? Like it was great. Like I loved it. But yeah, amongst so many smart people, just really politically savvy, and people who I like call inspirations. The one thing about youth parliament though that was um, slightly disheartening was that we were kind of debating mock bills, and we were in like mock select committees, and everything was just a simulation. And I think it could have been a really cool opportunity to actually kind of do some things, or allow young people the space to make actual recommendations about actual kind of bills that were passing through the house, or to to put some ideas on the table that might enlighten our MPs as to what young people want to make happen for New Zealand. So it was great. But yeah, there were moments where both I felt like incredibly nervous and like a massive imposter, because there were just so many very intelligent people in the room. But yeah, also I would have liked for it to have had a little bit more of its own kind of decision making power or space, while recognizing that that's hard because um, but yeah, it would have been good.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so what made you decide to run for Kapiti Coast District Council?
Yeah, good question. A couple of people just kind of shoulder tapped me and said, "Look, like you've spent this whole year on the outside, and if we don't start to create some bridges to the inside, then who's going to represent the voice of those people who who are on the outside and who are kind of activists and the protesters um, and those who are mobilizing." So I kind of reflected on that and also thought about how, as I mentioned, like how hopeful the school strikes made me, and then just kind of thought, look, again, if I think about my why, like I want to be able to say, and no, I did everything in my power and use my voice to its full potential to speak up for the next generation and the planet. Councils are places fraught with kind of institutional perspectives and just people who have quite draconian views, people who are quite conservative, often older. And I just kind of felt like, yeah, maybe these spaces could do with a different perspective as well, to kind of balance the conversation and to hopefully create some different outcomes than the ones that we're on track to creating. So I decided to run at the age of 18. Never thought I could actually get elected, but I just thought this is a great opportunity to kind of bring to the fore these points of conversation. And yeah, lo and behold, I ended up getting more votes than the other two candidates combined and have just been re-elected for a second trainium. So I don't know. It's an interesting role, though. I'm the only person under the age of 50 around our council table. So I often find that whenever there's a conversation about youth-related issues or the long term or the future, everyone's eyes go, Sophie, which is like, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it does kind of put a lot of pressure on my shoulders, a lot of weight on my shoulders. So I'm all about kind of holding the door open for other young people to come through and trying to create those pathways to more involvement.
Absolutely.
Of young people in local government.
What achievements have you been proudest of getting across the line in your time at council?
Oh yeah, there's a few, eh? So I'd say, where should I start? I'll probably start on like climate-based ones. I'll just rattle through a couple. We have just hired a couple of new climate change educators, which is really exciting. So they're working with our business and our kind of education community and helping to support them to reduce emissions. We've set aside over $200,000 in climate action grants, which we're dishing out to the community to come up with projects and kind of catalyze climate solutions locally. Just not last week, the week before, we signed off on our intensification plan change, which is just like so exciting. Probably one of the most exciting decisions I feel like I've been able to help lead. And yeah, it'll mean that we're enabling up to 15 stories in our kind of main community along our railway line. So yeah, that's huge because it'll look like intensification in the right place for the right people, and hopefully also enabling some kind of low cost housing in there too, some affordable rentals. And yeah, we're also setting up a community land trust to help kind of run some of that housing stock. So that's really cool. The intensification side of things is really exciting from my perspective. We're also about to set a district-wide emissions reduction target of 2040, which is very, some say very ambitious, but I think it's the ambition that we need right now because our world is quite literally on fire. And so if we're not ambitious, then we're just resting on our laurels and what could be and what actually is a human rights and like a massive social challenge as well for our people. So if we think about the well-being of our people, this is one of the most important issues of our time. We've also almost doubled our investment into our cycleways and our walkways. So something I'm really proud of. And yeah, we're just continuing to chip away at things. But climate is our kind of second priority. I would love it to be our number one, but out of our strategic priorities that we've set for this trainium, it's at number 2, which is I think still really good recognition of how important we see this challenge has been.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what was it like running for election the second time around in 2022? Did people treat you differently?
Yeah, people did treat me differently, and yeah, I think they just knew a little bit more about me and the work that I'd done, and so it was kind of easier to warm to them, or to, like, there was already kind of somewhat of a pre-existing connection there. So yeah, it was good, but it also felt higher stakes because it was like, if they voted me out, well, then I've obviously done something wrong. Whereas if you get voted in having not had any kind of political runway, so to speak, then yeah, people either take a chance on you or they don't. Whereas like I had a track record, so yeah, I kind of felt like there was more at stake, and I wanted to continue. I deeply wanted to continue the work that I'd started over 3 years, because in that 3 years you only get to be a part of one long-term plan, which is the main opportunity to set budgets. And so, um, you're still kind of like learning the ropes as you're doing it, and then so in your second training, you can hit the ground running and actually shape that properly. So
Yeah, yeah, for
mm.
sure. Having now been both outside the establishment as an activist and also inside it as a councillor, what are the differences? What are the pros and cons of each arena?
Oh, the differences is 100% pace of action. Like being on the outside, being in the activism space, we could decide that we wanted to, I don't know, as an example, that we wanted to spend a bunch of money on buying some high-vis vests and megaphones. And, it might have been $1,000. We didn't have that much, but we tried to put money towards things that were going to make an impact, and we just made that decision and it happened. And I know at a council level, we're dealing with larger sums, but it's still, we can talk about, putting some money behind like social advertising and like promoting, boosting our social media posts, and that seems to take about 3 weeks to get approval. So it's those sorts of things where you can start a conversation, but then it has to go through about 2 or 3 different layers of management, which is fine because it's just the checks and balances, but it's just a reality of the system, is that it's a whole lot slower. I think yeah, that's one of the biggest differences. I think too, on in the activism space, I really appreciated being able to be around a whole bunch of people who I feel really inspired by. And it's not to say that in council I'm not inspired by my colleagues, but sometimes I'm quite challenged by their views. And so you kind of have to bite your tongue. Whereas in the activism spaces, I find I can just speak freely. I can be myself. I can kind of say what's on my heart, and I don't have to second guess. Whereas in council, I really have to be aware of who I'm around, and what they might say and how I might need to speak to be able to ensure that what I'm saying lands with them. I also feel like in activism, everyone has such a common purpose and a common motive, whereas in politics, not everyone is on that same buzz, and so that can have its challenges as well. But yeah, I'd say the biggest difference is probably just like the pace of change and the systems that you have to work your way through and understand and get to know. And it's just like our council employs over 300 people, so there's 11 of us elected members, and then you got to get to know all of them intricately, and then you've got to get to know the key staff that you're working with and understand kind of where they fit in, and it's just a lot. Whereas in activism, it's so organic, it's so, you just all kind of move with each other, and it's less hierarchical, less structured, which I enjoy. So I'm still involved in School Strike for Climate and the Aotearoa Climate Strike kind of coalition, which is a newly forming group which has Fridays for Future as part of it, because I really do miss that kind of energy in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, this next one's a tricky question for everyone, so no pressure. But what's next for you?
Oh, that is a really tricky one. Um, yeah, to be frank, I don't know. And I think past me would have been so concerned that I didn't know, or like would have felt quite almost embarrassed by that. But I'm like, no, I genuinely don't. And I'm really just enjoying the council space. And yeah, as challenging as it can be at times, I'm enjoying the challenge of chairing this committee, which is council's only committee of the whole, so everyone on the council's on it. We're just heading into our long-term planning process, so I guess that's next for the next wee while anyway. I don't really know, like beyond that, next election, not sure. I mean, the mayoralty is always an option, but there's a lot of things to weigh up with that. There's the potential of kind of working for an NGO, which I feel like I'd quite enjoy. I'd love to do a bit of work overseas potentially, like with the UN Environment Program or some sort of like in that kind of sphere. But I guess the main thing is just figuring out where the heck I can have the most impact. Like and it's so hard to balance or to understand, like, yeah, where the most impact could be made, based on the skill set that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Fair enough, fair enough. Um, New Zealand has a particularly strong environmental consciousness and a history in that space that the country is quite proud of. I mean, opposition to genetic engineering, nuclear free,
Mm.
world's first national level Green Party. With the school strikes for climate, were you conscious of that history, or did having those movements and those people who went before you make it a bit easier, give you confidence in what you were doing?
Yeah. I think definitely that we recognize that we were standing on the shoulders of giants, and people who were involved in those movements
Mm.
were very supportive of what we were doing, and we had, great mentors and people we could confide in who understood, um, and who very much kind of paved the way for this sort of activism. So it was awesome. But yeah, something that we kind of tried not to do though was to, um, yeah, while we wanted to kind of celebrate the wins and, as you say, like be quite clear about whose shoulders we were standing upon, um, recognizing that there's so much more that needs to be done. And so we had really clear demands that Parliament declare a climate emergency, that we pass an ambitious zero carbon act with cross-party support. The ambition wasn't necessarily there, but it had cross-party support, so that's a tick. Parliament did declare a climate emergency. We also had a demand in there around agricultural emissions and the pricing of them, and that's something that National's really dragging the chain on, and at least Labor's now said that by 2025 that'll be a reality if they're back in. So that's I guess something to be potentially excited about. But yeah, we kind of we're trying to strike a bit of a balance between, like, not wanting to just point the finger and, trying to find a balance between kind of pointing the finger and saying, oh, you're not doing enough, do that, like, and actually then saying also too, we're willing to work alongside you, to walk alongside you, to connect you up with people who have experience in environmental movements, whether they be in Taranaki around oil and gas and, just transition. There's such a massive wealth of knowledge who our MPs, our politicians need to tap into, who we connected with through School Strike for Climate, who we could have really supported into those conversations. So we were quite clear to not only just demand, but also to work alongside, which is why I think, had a lot of doors open to conversations. And we continue to meet with ministers and MPs now just to have those kind of backroom conversations and seed ideas and make connections. In the transport space, that's another massive one. Um, seeding conversations around e-bike subsidies, around free public transport, all of those sorts of things. So yeah, we definitely take lead from people who have been involved before as to what tactics work and don't, and how we should best engage with those we're trying to influence.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a bit before about, obviously the fight that you were fighting in terms of climate change and school strikes for climate. It was a very gargantuan task, and you talked about some of the getting a bit burnt out and that sort of thing. What kept you going?
Yeah, what keeps me going is just how important this moment in time is, and how much regret I feel like I'll feel if I don't do anything now. And as almost like toxic as that might sound, because it's just like hustle at all costs, like push your body to the absolute limits. That was kind of what keeps me going, was like, this is just so important. Like, I don't want to have to look in the eyes of my future children or grandchildren and say, like, we had this golden window of opportunity before 2030 to have halved our emissions, and I just kind of like sat on my hands and thought that someone else would do it for us. And so, yeah, I just was kind of motivated by that, and also by being out in the environment and just how beautiful the natural environment is and how lucky we are, like as you talked about, to have this incredible kind of native biodiversity and these ecosystems that sustain sustain us, and that sustain themselves, and the resilience of that in the face of a changing climate. Like, oh, it's just pretty incredible. I think we have a lot to learn from nature, and also from Indigenous peoples who recognize themselves as
Yeah.
not separate from but a part of the environment, and all of those things. Like, it's inspiring. So I think both I was motivated by this sense of like urgency and just like it needed to go 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 go, but also taking those moments of stillness to be in the environment and just take a big deep breath and go, this is what we're trying to protect and save. Like, how beautiful. And yeah, there's so much potential in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might know the answer to this next question already, but there's lots of really pressing issues that face the world and face future generations. Obviously, climate change we've talked about, but growing inequality, things like the housing crisis, all of these sorts of things. What do you think is not only New Zealand but the world's biggest threat going forward? Maybe aside from climate change, which I think might be your answer.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I would say climate change, but also in the flow-on effects from that, like the potential for water and resource shortages, and just, yeah, the potential for like massive humanitarian crises if climate change kind of continues to run its course, and we continue to produce emissions which continue to further it. So yeah, that would, I think, be the biggest one, is resource shortage and food, food supply, food systems, water supply, water systems, and just the impact that climate will have on. So climate change, but also like we can, as you say, we can park that because it's already identified. And yeah, the implications of it, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to ask you to give messages to two groups of people now, the older generations above you, and also like your generation, the generation below you maybe as well. If you could say one thing to each of those groups, what would you say?
Okay. If I could say one thing to the older generation, I would say, what kind of legacy do you want to leave, and what kind of ancestor do you want to be? And right now you have the opportunity to choose, and depending on who you vote for in this coming election, depending on what choices you make as to how you use your voice and the conversations that you have, um, can make a huge impact, because we're a relatively small nation. We're connected, we're interconnected, we know each other, we see each other. And so if we can make those changes and vote climate this election, I would say that's one of the biggest things that we have within our power to do, to impact the the kind of the course that we take. So vote climate this election and think about the kind of legacy you want to leave. And if I was to say something to the younger generation, I would say, back yourself, back your voice. Don't wait until you feel like you have all of the knowledge or all of the understanding, or until you feel like you're the smartest person in the room, or you have all the self-confidence to say what needs to be said. Be courageous in the face of in the face of hate against both the planet and also fellow people. Don't be complacent in that, and know that once you raise your voice, so many other young people will support you, or join a group of other young people. Don't feel like you're in it alone. But yeah, the most important lesson that I learned is how much we are our own biggest enemy, and how much we stop ourselves from being at the tables we need to be at. It's so often just this like assumed way of thinking that we don't deserve to be there, or we don't have the knowledge to be at the table, but like you 100% do. And actually our perspectives are what's needed right now. So get in there and don't be afraid.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great message. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, but thanks so much for taking the time out to join us today.
All good. Thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me.
And ngā mihi nui everyone at home. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in another episode. Kia ora.